So from the 40 years from 1980 to 2020, China experienced the fastest economic development in world history for a large country. And it showed what's possible in our world today because of technology, education, infrastructure, how big an advance can be made. And I watched this, by the way, with my own eyes personally, because my first visit to China was 1981. And so China was not a rich country in 1981. China was very poor in 1981 because of the history of the previous 150 years. And over that 40-year period, which is the period of my professional life, China experienced this rapid development. And my view is that's what's possible in all parts of the world. So while I completely hail China's accomplishment and know that it draws on deep roots of China's history and civilization, I do believe it's something that all regions of the world can accomplish. Maybe not at the same speed, maybe not with all the same success as China, but I do not write off any part of the world, Africa or India or South Asia or Central Asia or Latin America, this idea that we could all live in peace, in mutual prosperity, with rapid economic development in poor countries, I think is the reality of our world in its potential, but obviously not the reality of our world in its actuality. So we need to understand the world as it could be and then aim to achieve that world. Unfortunately, this was not the idea of the United States at the end of 1991 when Professor Fukuyama declared the end of history. The idea was that the Western world would lead the world from now onward, and especially the United States within the Western world would lead the world onward. Whether other regions developed or not was of modest interest, but if they did develop, they needed to develop under the wing of the United States. In other words, what was important at the end of the Cold War was dominance, not cooperation or peace. And this is why I think the world has remained and become more and more dangerous over the last 35 years. So to my understanding, we have a mindset problem. And the mindset problem is that the Western world dominated the world economy and world politics and finance for about 250 years, roughly from 1750 to roughly the year 2000. And during that period, the ideology in the Western world explained that dominance as an inherent, rightful feature of the world. And it explained that dominance in a number of different ways, some very extreme, some a little bit less extreme, because there were theories of racial superiority, there were theories of social superiority, there were theories of cultural superiority, there were theories of religious superiority, that this was a Christian world after all. But whichever theory one subscribed to, there were theories of genetic superiority, biological superiority. Whichever view one took, the idea was deeply embedded in the mores, the stories, the beliefs, the institutions, and the politics of the Western world. And two countries dominated most of all, and most of the world's problems today can be traced to them, actually. One was Britain, and China had quite an interesting experience with Britain, starting from 1793 up through probably the end of World War II. And the other has been the United States, which is a successor to Britain in both the Western world and the Anglo-Saxon world. So the British definitely had an arrogance of power, and they used that arrogance of power in China, in India, in Russia, in every part of the world, because the belief was that Britain was the empire on which the sun never set. This was the era of Pax Britannica, although it wasn't so peaceful, but it was the era of British dominance. And the 19th century was really defined by British dominance internationally. Europe experienced two disastrous civil wars in the first half of the 20th century, which we call World War I and World War II, but in Europe they were really civil wars within European countries. And at the end, Britain was no longer able to maintain a global empire, but the United States took over at that point. And the U.S. inherited the mindset and the institutions of British imperial rule. The main geopolitical institution of British imperial rule was to control regimes of different parts of the world. So Britain mastered what we call regime change operations. If you don't like a government, replace it. It's a different kind of foreign policy from diplomacy. In diplomacy, if you don't like a government, sit down and negotiate. If you're British in the 19th century and you don't like a government, threaten it, kill the person, the ruler, or overthrow it. And this was the main mode of British action. In the second half of the 20th century, the United States took over that method of operation. Indeed, the British taught it to the Americans, I would say. And in 1953, we did a joint venture together, the British and the Americans, the British MI6, the spy agency, and the CIA, to overthrow the government of Iran, which brings us to our current situation.
偷偷告诉大家，我最近发现了新法宝 Royal Face 逆时奇迹系列，它有活肤露、全效精华，还有精华霜。尤其我皮肤比较偏干，所以我非常的注重保湿。保湿做得好，肌肤自然烹润。提亮肤色更年轻，抚平皱纹超有感，而且气色变好。用心保养，每天都更美一点。美吧。